we look at the pattern of energy expenditure that follows exercise. And one way we can do that is by analyzing what's termed EPOC. And that's what I'm going to call it from now on, because what it stands for is excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. Long-term, I'm not going to say that every time. So get cool with EPOC. And it's just what it says. I mean, it's excess. So more than we'd normally utilize post-exercise comes after O2 consumption. Okay. So it's really a measure of the energy necessary to return us to baseline, get us back to where we started, reestablish that homeostatic state. And it measures oxygen to calculate calories burned. And in doing so, we can calculate the actual energy expenditure. We can put a number on it, assuming, we're actually measuring it, which is something that has to be done in a lab. So if you harken back to a couple of weeks ago, when we talked about VO2 on kinetics, this is similar to how on kinetics relate to oxygen debt, in that when we ramp up our effort, the oxygen system, the aerobic system can't catch up quite quickly. So we incur a little bit of debt. We got to pay it off. We dip into our anaerobic resources, yada, yada. EPOC is reflective of the off kinetics timeline. So this is the other side of things. So with the on kinetics, there was that biphasic response where we had the fast phase and it was followed by a slow phase, if you'll recall. So the off kinetics, to a large extent or to a very high extent, depending on who you ask and how you measure it and how you chart it, mirrors this effect. So it happens just the same way. And yes, the exercise domains, the moderate, heavy, severe, extreme can have some effect on it, but it's argued that it's just the same. So there's a couple points here. And one is that there's a rapid and a prolonged component. So just keep that in mind, just like the on kinetics. And then the other point is that for the sake of this discussion, off kinetics are going to be equal to EPOC. They're not the same thing, but for what we're talking about today, they might as well be.
So like put in another way, you send the body the signal that, hey, I'm training and working hard, and your body, okay, ramps things up. That's the VO2 on kinetics, right? And then when we're talking about VO2 off kinetics, it's the body starts to get the memo of, oh, okay, not putting out that effort. I'm going to ramp things down, right?
Exactly right.
In the most basic terms.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yep. So what exactly is EPOC? Pretty simply, it's just a measure of the oxygen that we utilize in order to facilitate the exercise come down. So it's basically the other side of things. How much energy does that take? So what does this measure of oxygen consumption after exercise tell us? Because we know that during the oxygen consumption, we can measure efficiency, right? We can look at the actual oxygen cost of exercise, and we can reduce that cost by increasing efficiency, or increase efficiency by reducing that cost. When we measure it afterwards, we gain some insights, a further understanding of the residual workload. So this allows us to quantify energy expenditure after the fact. And we can do this because we know that a liter of oxygen consumed is equivalent to, or it takes about 5 calories of energy. So 1 liter of O2 consumed, 5 kilocalories of energy burned. So for example, one study looked at high intensity repeats, alternating repeats, where they worked at 90% of VO2 max, recovered at 30, did it over and over again for, I can't remember the length of time, but they compared this to 36 minutes at just 60% of VO2 max steady state. And it was equal work, equal watts, same amount of calories, same amount of energy expenditure prior to post. And what happened in post is that the high intensity training yielded an increase in EPOC for 38 minutes, which equated to about 3.6 additional liters of oxygen consumed. The continuous only elevated it for about 17 minutes for about 1.9 liters of oxygen consumed. So knowing that conversion, this is an 18 versus 9.5 calorie difference between doing intervals and doing steady state work. So yet another point in favor of high intensity interval training. So the real point here is what we're trying to figure out is just how disruptive was the work performed.
Can I point out something with this really quick too? This is a great example of when you look at data, you could express that in 2 different ways and it would be very different. So like you could say the fact that it's basically one burns twice as much as another, right? But if you really look at that, the difference between 18 to 9.5 calories is likely very minimal in terms of the impact on your body, right?
Yep. Yeah, that too is a salient point. We're going to come back around to that.
On that with some studies, they're like, no, it's double, it's twice as much. But then when you look at it, it's just, it's not a meaningful amount, right? So
yeah, for sure. Not in day-to-day living, maybe in a lab. Okay, so considering these two phases, what takes place during the rapid phase, and they usually limit this to the first hour or so. So replenishment of oxygen stores, right? We got to resaturate hemoglobin and myoglobin, resynthesize phosphagens and glycogens, your ATP, your creatine phosphate, your stored sugar, and lactate removal, as it's sometimes termed, but more accurately, metabolism, right? We're going to utilize it aerobically. The more obvious things that are occurring, and these are the things, one of the things that Sean pointed out is increase in circulation, increase in ventilation, huffing and puffing. And along with that is an increase in body temperature. So anytime we do this, we get an increase in oxygen uptake. Increase in oxygen uptake increases oxygen cost, increases energy consumed, increases that energy expenditure. And regarding the body temperature specifically, there was a 2008 study that had athletes do a really, or maybe just sedentary folk, I don't remember, but they did a very light workload for just 60 minutes in a 30 degree chamber. So that's about 86 degrees Fahrenheit. And what they noted was that only half of the heat stored was dissipated after 60 minutes of recovery, leading to showing us that the majority of the residual heat was still in the muscle. So we're still cooling after a light workload and 60 minutes of recovery. At least they were in this example. So, and I know we're talking with Hannah and Alex here. Undoubtedly, you guys have dealt with this. You don't just cross the line and everything returns to normal and you're good to go, especially on a hot day.
Yeah, Alex, you just mentioned this with your yesterday, I think you did 4 by 5 minute VO2 intervals in 100-degree heat.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't stored that 100-degree heat for the rest of the day.
I'm sure you did. You probably went to bed with it.
Yeah. Do you have that ever after races too? In this case, Hannah, I know I've felt that. Like I feel like I'm just like radiating heat post race.
Yeah, absolutely. I've felt it, obviously the hotter the race, I feel like the longer you feel it. But I mean, when you cross the finish line, of course, everyone wants to put a jacket on you because all the spectators are like, oh, it's cold. But you're still so hot for so long until you've been cooling down for an hour. And then you're like, oh, wow, it is kind of cold. But if it's been 100 degrees, I mean, there have been days where I've done my workout and been done at noon and still at 9 o'clock at night, I'm like, why is the heater on?
Yeah. It's crazy how much of that heat, and it's, I guess you kind of could say that we retain it, but really we create it, right, Chad? Mm-hmm. Like we're still generating all that heat thereafter.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I ask a question here? I'm curious. What role do you think adrenaline might play in this? Because surely you have an adrenaline rush, and the adrenaline doesn't just, like you're saying, it's not an off switch. It doesn't just leave your body after the race. So how much do you think adrenaline is impacting, respiratory rate, all of those things?
According to what I read, a fair amount. So that leads us to that one other point to make regarding the rapid phase, which actually has to trickle into the prolonged phase and probably sticks there for, whatever length of time, I don't know, but that's the parasympathetic reactivation, or what's just as easily termed as sympathetic withdrawal. So the idea being is that we've been in a fight or flight phase for what's the word I'm looking for? State for a period of time, and we have to reverse that. And again, just like everything else, just because we shut things off, just because we stopped working, doesn't mean that it immediately withdraws. And one of the effects, or one of the physiologic actions that goes along with this sympathetic activity is this increase in catecholamines. So norepinephrine or epinephrine or adrenaline, noradrenaline, depending on which side of the pond you find yourself on, has to reverse itself. That doesn't happen instantaneously. So that's a very good point. And so this is actually probably a good transition between these two phases. I'm sure there are other things that overlap. Nothing's tidy ever with biology, physiology. So let's look at what happens during the prolonged phase of EPOC. And whereas the short phase was limited to about an hour's worth of activity, the prolonged phase has a half-life that numbers in hours. And of the studies that I looked at, I found the upper limit, not for the half-life, but the total time the EPOC stayed elevated to be at 38 hours. So there are things we can do that can affect us quite a ways after the act.
Wow.
So during, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I feel like people are going to listen to the 18 versus 9 calories and be like, oh, sweet. When I do VO2 effort, I'm just going to burn 18 more calories. It's fine. But I wanted to be clear, like that's one piece of it, like very close after. So
Yeah.
So like Jonathan
Yep.
said, it's not a switch. You're not just like, oh, 10 more calories will be fine. Like this, through the heat and through how long the EPOC lasts, it's going to be quite a few more calories on those big days.
And the longer it hangs on, there are certain undesirable aspects of this that I'm going to get to. So bear with me. So during this prolonged phase, one of the things that occurs is a shift in substrate. So we've been metabolizing largely probably carbohydrate, and depending on the intensity, of course, and now we shift from carbohydrate metabolism to fat metabolism. And in doing so, there's this increase in the rate of what's called the fatty acid triglyceride cycling. So basically, when we liberate fat stores, when we're working, we break down adipose tissue that's stored as fat stored as triglycerides, right? Kick those fatty acids into the bloodstream. Now they can be utilized by the muscle tissue. But when we shut off exercise, those fatty acids are still floating around. They've got no use, so they have to be repackaged, whether that takes place intracellularly or extracellularly. It requires energy. And this process is often credited for a significant, if not the most significant part of EPOC following prolonged steady state exercise, which makes perfect sense considering if you've been working at a low rate and your fat metabolism is probably higher than your carbohydrate metabolism, imagine working at 60, 70% versus 80 or 90%, then there's going to be pretty free flowing state, assuming you're not just jamming carbohydrate into the system, of fatty acids, right? And this has all got to be reversed. And I'm sure to some extent this carries to higher intensity exercise. It has to. So Barr in 1990 actually went as far as to say that the energy cost of this increased TGFA cycling rate may account for as much as half of the delayed component of EPOC. So of all the other things I'm going to tell you right now that affect this prolonged phase of EPOC, this is the big hitter. And then an overarching point that I don't want to get lost in the noise here is that most of this activity, most of the activity we do during exercise is muscular. So most of the recovery is too. Okay, and that'll make more sense as we go if it doesn't make sense already. Okay, so what causes differences in EPOC? And I'll just point out the study that I called a lot of this from. It's Borsheim and Barr 2003, a link to the review. They looked at 60 studies, the ones that actually qualified for inclusion, but in the paper itself, there are 140 citations. So it's a pretty weighty read. And there's a lot of good stuff in it. It'll steer you a million directions.
That's very,
it's quite
that's
a lot.
Understated.
I read them all. I did not.
This is what Chad's doing on his trainer with his classical music and his unwashed boobs.
Yeah, Chad, I don't know if you know this, but you were memed by the cycling internet this morning. Actually, somebody made a meme about like people that like listen to music on the trainer being normal, other people that like watch old races being normal, and then how terrifying people are that read when they're on the trainer.
Oh, you can do all those things. I can totally do them all at once.
Yeah, Chad does them all at once.
Increase that bandwidth. Come on.
Yeah, just read 140 citations while you're training. Yeah, sounds great. So, sorry, Chad.
Okay, so what did Borsheim and Barr tell us? He told us a number of things, but largely they told us that it all comes down to intensity. So to get just a little sciencey for a second, intensity demonstrates a curvilinear and sometimes an exponential relationship to EPOC. So what that means is that as the intensity of exercise goes up, so too does this EPOC after the fact. Okay, with curvilinear, that means at some point there's a break though, and that higher intensity is actually going to turn downward. Whereas with exponential, just goes up till that upward swing basically becomes a vertical line. The point is, higher the intensity, the greater the EPOC in most cases. And what's also interesting is that intensity affects both the magnitude, which we typically measure in liters, as I just called out a second ago, and the duration of EPOC, so how long it lasts. And a 2014 study by Mann they looked at EPOC through the lens as using it as a marker for training load, for us to get a sense of how severe the disruption to homeostasis was. And it's interesting because they tried to use EPOC, the magnitude specifically of EPOC, as a measure of the internal load, such that they could model the relationship between training load and training response, which is a great idea. And I don't know that it went anywhere. The study was done 6 years ago, and I don't see a lot of devices that actually measure EPOC in order to tell us when to train more or less. But still an interesting idea. They took roughly 40 moderately trained runners and just had them run on a treadmill for 20 minutes at a time, either at 60, 70, or 80% of VO2 max. And what they noticed was that EPOC actually became slower or more prolonged every time they increased the intensity. And this totally demonstrates exactly what I'm talking about. That there's a positive relationship between EPOC and intensity. And a couple of examples of this that are a little bit interesting. One study did 20 minutes of work intervals performed at 85% of VO2 max, and they saw a 3 to 7% increase in EPOC, and it lasted for about 12 to 16 hours. But then they dropped the intensity and increased the duration. So now they go 30 minutes, but they do steady state at only 70%, slight increase in EPOC, and it only lasts 3 hours. So again, It just drives home the point. And this is actually quantified in a study linked by Gore in 1990, where intensity accounts for, and he put a hard number on it, 45% of the variance in EPOC. So again, all the things I'm going to describe, most of it comes down to intensity.
And you're just talking about a 15% difference in intensity in those two examples,
Surprising.
At least.
Yeah.
And
there's
even
a lot of
the lower
examples of that.
intensity one is longer. Crazy. Wow. I guess this kind of explains like why Twilight criterium racing, like Tuesday Night World sort of stuff, is so brutal on sleep.
Well, the duration's high there, the intensity's high. I mean, it's abusive. So it's a big disruption. Takes those riders well away from their homeostatic state, which the body is doing everything it can to return to.
How do you manage that, Hannah, with like fat tire crits when you do epic rides? Because those happen in the evenings.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, one of the things I was going to say is it's interesting to think about this EPOC and this duration of essentially recovery when we're looking at metrics like so many people use Whoop now, right? So you're looking at heart rate variability and you see, like maybe it's just overnight, maybe it's a couple days, like he said, 36 hours in one instance. So yeah, that just struck me a little bit. But I think like those fat tire crits, it's tough. It's pretty funny when you talk to, your fellow athletes after it. It's like, oh, how did you sleep last night, Alex? I'm sure you can relate to that. And everyone's like, oh, I slept about how you'd expect. And I think we, a lot of the time I hear people blame it on the caffeine because, you caffeinate up so much, at least a lot of people do before those. And I'm sure that plays a role, but I think a lot of it is also exactly what we're talking about here, that we don't give enough credit to that for sure.
Yeah, and the adrenaline piece too, right? Like, I mean, especially for those Tuesday night crits, the adrenaline of hometown glory, nothing beats that. So I don't know. I feel like it always reminds me of the Missoula XC too. That was at like 6 or 7 p.m. And it was just like, I wouldn't fall asleep till like 2 a.m. I would be laying in bed for hours after that. It's just, it's a combination of everything, right? Like sleeping when you're hot is hard, and then you're all worked up, and then you're thinking about the race. And I'm sure caffeine plays a role as well. And I know some athletes who, like for fat tire crits, won't use caffeine because they think the sleep is more important. So there's a lot of different approaches, but I don't think there's any getting around the EPOC and the adrenaline and just being an athlete and like that high you ride for racing.
I think of USA Crits racers too. A lot of them have back-to-back weekends of racing or stage races for all of us average Joes and Janes listening in, that we do a stage race. If we're talking about EPOC that could last, for upwards of, in one case, up to 36 hours, that could mean that you are carrying in this, you are entering your next event still very much elevated in this state. And
I think of the implications on stage
just never
racing.
leave it. You just stay within it for the duration of the stage race. It's tough. Interesting to think about the actual contextual implications of this for us.
And very related to that is the duration over which these things occur. So there is a relation with duration too. So whereas that was a curvilinear or exponential relation, the relation with duration to EPOC is more linear. But it still bears up. So as you drag it out, it continues to increase, but it only influences the duration of EPOC rather than the magnitude. So it doesn't bump it up a heck of a lot. It just drags it out longer, and it only seems to take place when you're above 50% of VO2 max. So you have to be doing a certain level of work. So if you, for instance, are doing something that you hope will wind you down at the end of the evening, and you keep it at 40%, chances are very minimized that you're actually going to impact your sleeping, impact your recovery process. It just kind of talks to the efficacy of true recovery rides. Get on the bike and recover at 60%. Well, you may not get the impact that you're actually looking for. And then it's a good time to note that the biggest EPOC values are actually derived when both the intensity and the duration are substantial. And again, I mean, Hannah and Alex, both of you guys, you're not out there for an hour at a time with a lot of your events. And now Alex, being not Mr. 4 hours, out there for a heck of a long time. And I guarantee the intensity is high that whole time. So the come down is going to be pretty protracted. Okay, so what else can affect EPOC? And these are minor players, but players nonetheless. It does mostly come down to intensity with a secondary role of duration, and then the combination of intensity and duration, I think, are pretty much third in line. But the modality. So there was a 2015 study by Sousa that just looked at differences between rowers and runners and cyclists and swimmers. And there were subtle differences where they were present, but I don't think anything worth really bringing up here. I don't think anything is going to tweak anyone's training to a point that it's worth mentioning. Training status, and this is super equivocal. I looked at 4 studies and they suggested that EPOC may be smaller, larger, or not different between trained and untrained individuals. I mean, that about covers it. That's everything. So they told me virtually nothing, but there was some information that led me to believe that VO2, with regards to VO2 max, that the higher it is, that the shorter the rapid phase is. And this makes perfect sense. If you have a high VO2 max and you have fast on kinetics and they mirror each other, you're going to have fast off kinetics. That makes sense. But greater prolonged EPOC. And the catch is they have to, some studies only looked at it up to 15 minutes and said, oh, there's no difference in the prolonged phase of EPOC. But if they dragged it out to longer than 15 minutes, they noticed, oh, no, there's still quite a lot going on. So once they started looking at longer recovery durations, they recognized that even with really high VO2 max, the prolonged phase of EPOC was still very much elevated in these high level athletes. So, and just to explain that a different way, think about why. If you have higher fitness, excuse me, you have higher or faster kinetics, but also the greater the intensities and durations that elite athletes throw at their bodies, the greater the disruption in their recovery, the longer the recovery trajectory.
This is like another
kind of balances out.
This kind of goes back to the whole discussion of minimal effective dose in one respect, Chad. It's going to kind of tie into a question we're going to cover later about making your training, keeping the work the same, but making it unnecessarily hard, perhaps, and expecting to get more of it. If this ends up extending and increasing the EPOC that you experienced after your training, then it's flying in the face possibly of the adaptations you hope to gain, right?
No, that's a really interesting angle, and one I'll touch on for sure, but something I'd like to really explore.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I was just thinking about this. If they're measuring elevated EPOC for 36 hours, does this mean some poor human had to wear a gas exchange mask for 36 hours?
No. Typically they measure, they'll measure at, in fact, we're coming up on one of these studies at particular time periods. So, they'll measure it a certain amount of numbers prior, then a certain amount of numbers prior, just prior, a few hours.
So just like dodge so long. Got it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just draw a curve.
Because I'm not dropping out of EPOC if I have a mask on. I'm panicked anyway.
Random thoughts by Alex.
Yeah. No, it's a fair question.
Yeah.
Okay. So other possible influences on EPOC. One was gender, but it seemed like anytime that they said that women had lower EPOC than men, it was because they were throwing a lower relative workload at them. When they actually normalized to size and muscle mass, everything seemed to kind of balance out. Muscle composition was one. So whether fat-free mass or lean mass, and there's a pretty fine difference between these two things. I'm not even going to bother explaining it because it hurts my brain. There's a 2008 study by Tahara, and they pointed out a positive correlation between fat-free mass and EPOC. So, get swole, be a big person with big bones, all those things, greater EPOC. Interestingly, with lean mass, there was one study that pointed out that non-exercise muscles may contribute to EPOC due to perfusion with blood high in lactate. So, you shut everything off, but there's still lactate coursing through the system. That bloodstream doesn't delineate. It's still bathing underutilized or unutilized muscles with lactate-laden blood. And that lactate has to be metabolized aerobically. So boom, oxygen cost goes up.
So that could be kind of like a vote for why we do cool downs after something.
For sure. Yeah. Yep. To facilitate the processing of lactate. Yeah, that's a valid argument. And I'm pretty sure there's There are studies out there. And then the less obvious endurance muscles. So you think of the postural muscles and breathing muscles. And we were talking to Hannah yesterday, and she brought up this very thing, which ties in super nicely.
Yeah, it's super interesting because everyone thinks about, their quads, their glutes, all these like huge muscles that are working, but just breathing, takes muscles that we don't think about it because breathing's so natural. But, our diaphragm's working, our intercostals are working. And for me, something I noticed post Leadville was my scalenes. And the scalenes are muscles found in the neck, and they help with deep inspiration. They help to rise the first and second rib. And so after Leadville, which, it's at 10,000 feet, it's, 7 to 8 hour race for me. And I'm breathing hard the whole time. And the next day, taking a deep breath, I could feel the muscles in my neck just straining. So I could feel the soreness in those scalenes, which to me was just so strange, because you expect to wake up and have your legs be sore. But it just really struck me, because I thought, well, yeah, I guess, how many huge deep breaths did I take across that 8 hour period? Yeah, a lot. And so, yeah, just acknowledging those muscles and realizing how hard they work for us is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, completely. So muscles that you wouldn't even have thought of are still in the throes of recovery, 24 hours later, still elevating that oxygen consumption post exercise.
When we were driving after Leadville, a similar situation. I was driving actually with your fiance Chad back down from Leadville, I think 2 or 3 hours after the race. And I remember suddenly becoming aware of my breathing, and I was just doing the most shallow, short, small breaths. And I was like, this isn't normal. Like, I should actually be breathing normally. And I suddenly realized that the typically subconscious operation of my diaphragm, I had to consciously control it because it was so fatigued. Because when you're breathing up there, it's just tough to get anything, especially when you're at that level of activity for that long. So I was, consciously thinking like, okay, draw down your chest cavity, like I was like trying to actually make that muscle work because it got so fatigued. It's super interesting, especially in the breathing process, because it's typically autonomous, it feels like, at least it feels like it just takes care of itself. But even fatigue can happen at that level.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's not cardiac tissue. I mean, it deals with fatigue just like anything else. Well, not just like anything else, but to some degree.
Yeah. Super interesting. What's next, Chad?
Okay, so one other thing that bears mentioning in terms of what affects EPOC is strength training. And it's worth bringing it up because it's just another vote. Well, I would say it's a vote in favor of strength training, but considering the lesson that I'm going to share with you at the end of this, maybe not. But either way, strength training has a big impact on EPOC. So one study from 2002 looked at EPOC and they started well out, which I really like, because they established a pretty firm baseline. They looked at their athletes 34 hours removed from exercise prior to, mind you, and then steps along the way, all the way to 48 hours post. And what's interesting about that is two things: that they, really leaned into that whole baseline measure. And secondly, is that previous to this study, they hadn't looked at EPOC in strength training past 16 hours. So, whether it took place past 16 hours, nobody knew. These guys extended it to 48. And these are the ones that found out that VO2 could be significantly elevated above baseline 38 hours post. And all they had them do was bench press, power cleans, and squats. And the workout totaled 31 minutes. And again, big impact. I don't even know if this one was done in a circuit manner. It might've been with full recovery. I'm sorry, I didn't note that, but it is also worth noting that intensity is still a really important factor when it comes to strength training. If for whatever reason you're trying to elevate EPOC, and there are reasons for that, by the way, fat loss heading the charge. So circuit training in this case would be king. So instead of taking 3 or 4 minutes before you hit another set and chatting with your buddy or doing whatever people do when they waste time in the gym, actually, move on to the next exercise. Only get 20 or 30 seconds of rest. Keep that oxygen elevated, because if your oxygen consumption is elevated, well, even with strength training, you're pushing up, obviously, the aerobic stress, but also the eventual excess post-exercise oxygen consumption.
Interesting.
Okay. There are no comments. I'm going to move on to what all this translates to. Okay, so what does this all mean? Why is this pertinent outside of the questions asked? First off, small increments in our weekly caloric burn come largely from fat. And when we consider that weight gain is often due to a really slight, well, sometimes more, but often slight caloric surplus, but over an extended period of time, this could be seen as a method for weight regulation. If we basically increase, unbeknownst to us, our caloric intake more than our output, and we're gradually adding weight, well, this could be the slight difference that allows us to gradually take off weight and basically regulate our weight. So another point, and this was pointed out to me in a 2006 study by LaForgia, is that EPOC, and this is news to nobody, but it's not, or no, I'm sorry, getting ahead of myself. This one is, it will not impact energy balance. Point being, we don't need to increase our energy intake knowing that post-exercise, we're going to need more calories. They'll come from somewhere.
Yeah. Is this because of like fat metabolism, most likely, and the fact that we have plenty of stores on board for
exactly.
that?
And if you're nourishing appropriately, there's probably adequate nutrition on board anyway, but yes, largely due to fat metabolism, I would guess. This study also noted, and this is a little bit unrelated, but the cumulative effect of training for 3 times a week over the course of a year could have the energy expenditure equivalent to the energy stored in 1.5 kilograms of body fat, or 3.3 pounds. So this small little uptick, which doesn't seem like a lot, and it's actually not, over time can have a pretty substantial impact per year. If we're talking about not adding 3.3 pounds of body fat to our frames, that's a big deal. Another translation is, we've already touched on this, faster off kinetics, just like the on kinetics, translate to quicker recovery. And this means, higher recoverability is the fun term that's often thrown at this, but it's just better repeatability. And I assure you that both Hannah and Alex can relate to this. I mean, you tell me, how important is it to be able to repeat hard efforts within the context of a race?
Yeah.
And how much does that change with training?
Yeah. I mean, it's probably one of the most desired things, right? Like, I feel like for the general cyclist, there's like that chart, like, oh, I can hit X watts per kilo for a certain amount of time, but it's like, it's the athlete that can repeat that at then like 98%, 96%, 96%. Like, I feel like you see it on the last lap of XCO races quite a lot, is It looks like someone's getting dropped, but it's really, I think of it kind of like Usain Bolt always said he was the best at sprinting because he decelerated the least. It's kind of like that, but drawn over 90 minutes. It's the person who can just keep hitting close to that mark.
Exactly. How defining a factor is that when you're shaping the podium? Because I mean, I think of Nino Schurter and Flukinger. I mean, these guys just can hit and hit and hit again. And they talk about it. It always cracks me up when they talk about they're just testing the field. They're testing the field when it doesn't work. But if it would have worked, they would have went away and they would have stayed away. But the fact is, they can throw out those attacks because they know they have those capabilities. They can reel it back in and do it again, reel it back in and do it again.
Yeah. And I would add, even from a training standpoint, you can only train as hard as you can recover. And so if you're thinking, I mean, you can think about that day after day, but you can think about that even one interval to the next. If you can only handle 4 3-minute intervals, well, that's your limitation. What if you could do 10 of them? How much stronger are you going to be able to train? How much stronger are you going to race? And then how, are you going to be able to battle Nino in the last lap all of a sudden?
Exactly. And that's perfectly on the nose, because the next point I wanted to make is that the irony of this all is that it's really in our best interest, especially as elites, to minimize EPOC. You want faster recovery. You want it in the moment. You want to be able to hit again and again and again. You want it between workouts, between races, between training cycles. I mean, it's not desirable to have a protracted EPOC. Exactly. Not in terms of being able to recover and go again. You want to return to baseline. You want to reestablish homeostasis such that you can tax the system again, adjust to it, and repeat the cycle.
Yeah, that's once again, don't seek to make training harder. Seek to make training more frequent and more sustainable. Consistency, really. If you can hit your marks and consistently progress, then you're going to be better off. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing, right? And in theory, it's changing what that homeostasis is, right? With FTP and everything like that. It's like, what was a 8 out of 10 before becomes a 6 out of 10, and the EPOC responds that same way. So in a race, you're being able to hit higher numbers for a lower EPOC than those lower numbers were costing you. So it's, I mean, in a way, you're training, I guess, the EPOC system to to make your body more efficient at doing those efforts and doing them consistently.
Yeah. So Chad, any other notes to add on EPOC?
Yeah, so let me close out just with some additional considerations that didn't really fit anywhere within the discussion so far. First off, I came across a frequent mention of a high inter-individual variability. So subjectivity, right? In response to the same relative stimulus. This is arguable though, because I didn't find a single study, and I'm not sure there's one out there still, that follow the same athlete through, they didn't subject them to the same training stimulus over and over and see if maybe there was an intra-athlete variability. So cross athletes for sure, but what if that happens anyways, even within the same athlete? Another is that, do keep in mind, and this is news to no one, this is where I jumped ahead, is that most of the benefits of exercise is during the workout. Okay. Yes, we understand this. And Lechaminade in 2006 actually quantified how the energy expenditure of EPOC relates to the workout itself. And it's about a 5 to 10% bump. So for example, if you did an 800 kcal workout, you can look at 40 to 80 additional calories utilized via oxygen consumption and all these processes that are going on post-workout. My point here is that sprint intensity training may actually yield a higher EPOC, but the workout itself and the total energy expenditure is still going to be relatively low. So don't do a bunch of sprint workouts with the intention of lifting EPOC at the expense of what could be a quality workout. But with that said, when we look at this through the lens of weight and fat loss implications, EPOC becomes something different. It's now the exercise after effect and the caloric expenditure that takes place when you're not doing anything because you did everything right prior to. So the inclusion of some of those high intensity or sprint efforts that I just talked about within a steady state workout goes a long ways towards elevating EPOC. So if you're trying to boost EPOC, burn a little more fat post, well, that's one way to do it. Another weight or fat loss consideration is that recovery intervals actually contribute to total EPOC too. So when you're doing a 3x20 and you have 5-minute recoveries, there's a little bit of excess oxygen being used during that recovery valley that you're not getting credited for. So just yet another benefit of recovery valleys. And then anything that boosts EPOC is going to boost your lipolytic or fat burning capabilities. So again, from this perspective, this is a good thing. Maybe chasing EPOC actually makes sense. And it's I should mention that though 50% suffices, and that's where the studies set the floor, that if you can work over 70% of your VO2 max, so we're talking in the ballpark of 90% of threshold when you're on a bike, this is what optimizes that post-exercise energy expenditure. So do a little more work if you're looking to maximize EPOC.
So taking this full circle and bringing it back, the possible reasons that Pogačar's elevated breathing was continuing on the podium, the many things that Sean said, VO2 down kinetics, aerobic system still running to process byproducts of an anaerobic effort, recovery of repairing damage that was done, and then residual stress hormone, or like we're talking about adrenaline in the body. You got a blackout there, Sean. You nailed it. The bingo card's full. So that's absolutely the case. More fit athletes will expect to have a quicker ramp down than others, but also this is just something that everybody faces in one way or another. Is that an accurate, I guess, sum synopsis up of that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Cool. Thanks for the help with synopsis. Brain doesn't work today. So, and then looking back at that, the energy cost, it's not a substantial energy cost. It's not like you're doing, 2x whatever you did when you were training, but just the same, it's also not nothing. And it's something to consider because of the stress that it can add to your body too,
For sure. It's very not nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Very not nothing.
Yeah, no, and
English teachers
super poorly stated, but my point is it does add up to something. So credit where credit's due. It does have an impact. It just takes place over time. It's not something that at the end of every workout, you're like, oh, wow, I really maximized my EPOC there. That was a good day. No, it's just something that at the end of the year, when you don't have 3 extra pounds of belly fat, maybe you can credit EPOC.
Yeah, that I bet all of us that are listening to this have probably recognized the fact that the body composition changes that you generally have when you're consistently training versus when you are not consistently training. And a lot of this makes sense. It's not like you do a quote fat burner workout, or you do those fat burner workouts, in quick succession or something like that, or with high frequency. It's just the carrying on of consistent training shifts your body. This is one of the ways that it happens. So yeah, super interesting. Any other thoughts on this EPOC stuff from anybody before we go into the rapid fire questions? Cool. We have an extremely important one to start with. For those that watch Beers with Chad, they'll know that this one has an inside joke to it. But just the same, which character from Sesame Street would win in a criterium?
Big Bird.
I think, yeah, that was my knee-jerk reaction. But on a flat course, for sure. But on a hilly course, he's a pretty big guy.
Yeah.
Big Bird all day. That's
Why
like
Big Bird?
1,000 watts endurance pace.
That's true.
He's big. He's not very aero though. The feathers may help with being aero,
He's got
but
big
I'm not sure.
big levers, and so does Snuffleupagus. So those big drivers.
I thought everyone was going to say what I was going to say, but now I feel like I'm going with the Cookie Monster because he's really well fueled.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's what Amaret said this morning, because he brings great enthusiasm to the game.
Exactly.
You'd have to get him out of the trash can first, though. I mean,
yeah. Good
holes
point.
in it, so you
No,
can
that's
ride it back.
Grover. No, wait, who are we talking about?
Cookie Monster.
Yeah.
Who's in the?
Isn't Oscar,
That's
right?
Oscar the Grouch.
Yeah.
Oscar.
There you go.
He wouldn't do well. He's way too grumpy. He wouldn't. Yeah.
Yeah. I had 3 thoughts on this. I thought Big Bird would be the lead out man that I would want for sure. All right. Big old pocket of air, huge watts. He'd probably be able to hold for a while. But then I honestly, it's strange as it sounds, Rizzo would be like a little Caleb Ewan. He's got crazy energy, Rizzo. And he's able to just carry on. If you give him Big Bird in front of him, he might actually be pretty lethal. So he'd be pretty good. But I also thought of this, and I thought of Beaker, and I thought that at times Nate is Beaker to me in a crit race. He's like the almost like robotic scientific thing,
I think Beaker's a Muppet, though.
Oh,
pretty sure Beaker's a Muppet. Yeah.
I'm
Leave it to
confusing
Jonathan to give 3 answers to a rapid fire question.
Hey,
Way to dig deep into the character catalog.
If there's one skill that I have, it's overthinking. It's well developed. Next one from Barrow says, if you could only listen to one song while you train forevermore, what would it be?
I'll go first because I had to think of this for about a half a second. There's a song by the Black Foxes with 2 X's called Badlands. It's 8.5 minutes long. It's like the perfect blend between a Tool Journey and a Black Angel song. It doesn't abide any particular traditional song structure. I think you get like 5 verses before you even hit the pre-chorus. And then the chorus, every time I hear it, and it's got to be 4 or 5 times throughout the song, I can't hold myself back. It's ridiculously motivating and
700 watts
and passionate. Seriously, every time. And then the bridge is basically him reciting a poem behind almost a wall of noise. And it's, I've probably listened to the song 100 times. It's an 8.5 minute song, and I cannot hear it enough times.
8.5 is useful. You could listen to it across almost every sort of workout.
I've cycled it for an entire hour-long workout before, and it did the job.
Yeah. How about you, Hannah? What song would you have?
I think I'm going to cheat on this one and say if I had to listen to only one song, I would pick no songs, because I think I could get really used to my own thoughts, but one song would drive me crazy. Like if you're doing an interval and you don't have music, you can get in that zone. Like maybe you get in a flow or you're just thinking about something. But if the wrong song comes on during an interval, forget about it. Like you have to pause the song. It's just not an option to push through it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is why Hannah's one of the fastest. She can do intervals without music.
Yeah. How about you, Alex? What would you pick?
I cannot do intervals without music. I'll pick the latest one to pop up on my Discover Weekly, The Den by Joel Fletcher. And I'll let everybody look that one up because it's not a popular song. It's just the way my music works is I have a Spotify My Discover Weekly, and anything on that I really like, I heart that. And then it goes to my liked songs. And then I use that for key days. So it's all hitter songs. So there are no bad songs on interval days.
Nice. I agree with Hannah that it would be an absolute terrible curse to experience to only have one song to listen to forever. That would be really rough, but just the same, it'd probably be one of two songs. Sleep Now in the Fire by Rage Against the Machine is awesome for training for me. That one's great. There's another one too, by Pendulum, and it's called Self versus Self. That one's pretty good too. So those two would be ones that I would listen to. They're I guess metal songs, but those would be them. If you're listening right now, chances are you have fantastic suggestions. So if you're listening to the podcast, go to the forum and let us know your songs. And then we should put together a playlist on the forum of these, like the one songs that everybody wants to listen to. We'll put down our four, and then we'll add to it, and everybody will be able to find it on Spotify.
Yeah, we got to make it a public playlist, and you can go find it.
Yeah.
That'd be fun to listen to everybody's number one song, because go all over the place.
Yeah. Please, somebody don't put in something like Marvin Gaye or something just to sabotage us.
Here.
Yeah.
No Sesame Street theme song.
Yeah. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can put it down in the comments below, and we'll continually add to that. So that'll be a fun one to maintain. Okay. Next one from Nick says, where's the safest place to keep my keys while out on a ride, particularly on mountain bike rides where crashes or jostling could theoretically make me lose my keys? I have a persistent fear I will get back to my car. My keys will be out on the trail somewhere. I think you and all of us, Nick, share that fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's terrifying. Yeah.
Anything with a zipper or a closure. I mean, some jerseys have a little zipper in the back. You can stick it in your saddlebag if you have one, swap box if you have one of those. Anything that closes would make me feel better about it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I just want to take a moment to validate this fear because it's really real. Last year, so my fiance, he races enduro. He's a great rider. So when we do descents, he's down the trail. And last year I'm riding down and started to notice blood on the trail. I'm like, oh, great.
Oh,
right.
God.
So I come to the bottom and he just has this huge cut where I'm like, this is for sure stitches. Like, we need to get back to the car. And luckily he thought, oh, I need to make sure I have the keys first. And he didn't. So he's pouring blood out of his arm, and I'm searching all over the trail for the keys. So don't do that. And I agree, put it somewhere with a zipper.
At least he left you blood crumbs to go find
it. Gross.
If I can offer a pro tip, zippered and closed, yes, for sure, but you got to make sure you close that zipper. So you can't just leave the zipper dangling open, because we lost our keys on a ski hill, which meant sleeping in our ski clothes for an evening, trying to figure out how we were going to get from Mammoth back to Reno. It was a whole thing. Fortunately, somebody eventually, in like the 11th hour, found them for us. But I specifically put it in the zippered pocket, just didn't zip that pocket.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Another pro tip is ride from home. And then you don't need car keys.
Yeah. I know a lot of people also do like hide a key boxes too with their cars. That's a little tough with more modern cars, since they have like the fobs that would activate if you're there. So they make little hide a keys that are like Faraday boxes that you can put it in. I also see like a lot of people just hide their keys in different spots that aren't a hide a key box. And it always seems a bit risky to me. But then again, you know, I don't know. I guess depending on the area you live and everything else, that probably changes. I like the car I have. I just use a key, or sorry, not a key, but a credit card. Basically, my card just opens my car, or my phone opens my car, instead of having to worry about keys. And that has been the hugest upgrade, because that just like existing subconscious fear during every single ride that I've carried, now that it's gone, I'm just like, oh my goodness, I'm light. It feels so good to not have it anymore.
Tell me you own a Tesla without telling me you own a Tesla.
Yes. Yeah. It just changes everything substantially. So it's pretty cool. Okay. Next one. Where would your dream training camp be? And we can't go into too much detail on this. We can just go into the location, because we're going to go into detail on training camps after this. But where would your dream training camp be?
Somewhere warm with a beach that I haven't been before. New routes.
Yeah, I feel like I could list a lot of places that I've been that are really fantastic. Like anywhere in California, I feel like is pretty darn great. But I think for the fun of it, I'm going to say the Canary Islands, because it seems like all the Euros go there for training camp, and I've never been. So that's a dream for sure.
Orange Seal training camp 2021.
Yeah, you're a team.
Exactly.
You can make it happen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Chad, what say you?
Spain for sure. So it'd either be Mallorca, should be a little more exotic, or Girona, because Pete's told me many stories and it just sounds perfect.
Yeah, I have two. Girona would be one. The beach isn't a necessary component for me. It's call me a wuss, but I like to recover in air conditioning with my legs up on a soft bed rather than a hot beach. So that Girona would be one. I'd like to go there, but I think that my actual dream spot would be Austria. It's just like Austria is stunning, or Switzerland, one of those two. You'll have incredible roads. You have drivers also that, like, for all of you over there, that it is like a parallel universe when you're riding on the road and cars are kind to you and they give you space and they even cheer for you when they pass you. Like, that's amazing. And it's just
Andiamo.
yeah, it's just stunningly beautiful there. And for me, that motivates me a lot. Just being able to, like, being in a beautiful place really, really helps. I'm not sure if it's just because of like proximity to California and being there. It's incredible for training camps, but the coastal views and stuff, it doesn't quite inspire as much. I love the mountains. So yeah, it'd be awesome.
Cottage at the base.
Oh, twist my arm. Yeah. Woo. Yeah, that's perfect. That's the dream. Catch me in Austria retired someday. So, okay. Rose says, if I don't lube my chain on a smart trainer and perform a calibration with this lubeless chain, will my pedaling still be less efficient? AKA I'll have to work harder to reach the power target. Or will the inefficiency from this dry and noisy chain already be taken into account? Alex, what say you? This seems like something right down your alley.
I was going to just take a moment to plug my favorite TrainerRoad feature, which is, I think it's Power Match, right?
Yes.
So I use a Quark, so the chain isn't part of the equation for calculating power, and it tells the smart trainer the power from my power meter and then calibrates based on that. So in that case, it doesn't matter how gross your chain is.
Yeah, you don't ever have to lube it just because of Power Match. Yeah, I mean, if you calibrate with it, you're still dealing with. You're not going to be taking into account the chain because it's a spin down calibration, right? So if the free hub body on the trainer is really like bad and needs to be serviced, then that will affect your spin down calibration. But the chain itself won't affect the spin down calibration. So. But in terms of the power that you're putting in, it will be lost in between your legs and the power measurement device, right? And so your chain is in between that. Yeah. What were you going to say?
Run a wax chain on the trainer has been my little cheat, because the dirty look I'd get from Jen if I tried to bring a rag and a bottle of lube into the house to lube my chain inside I'd be dead. So I use one of the ice friction chains on the trainer, and it's been solid. You don't have to ever change it.
How'd the wax hold up on your cassette and chainring at Leadville? You went next level with that. You didn't just wax your chain, you waxed the cassette and chainring too. Did it hold up? Actually,
yeah, it held up super well. Yeah, I was super impressed with it. I mean, it's one of those things that it's harder to measure than the chain because there's not as much flex, but as a system, it makes logical sense. And ice friction has said it's a couple watts for each. And part of the process in any wax chain is to like completely degrease and clean the surface of the chainring, cassette, and pulley wheels. So the nice thing about that is it takes 2 out of the 3 out of the equation. You're running an already waxed and cleaned cassette and chainring. So you just have to worry about the pulley wheels. So it just makes the entire system work better. It actually engages, like it allows the chain to have maximal gains.
Interesting. Did it affect how the cassette like threaded onto the hub at all? Was that did you have to like clear off the wax with those SRAM?
No,
ones?
they put like when they're waxing it, like a little, I guess, like as if you were painting something, right? They put a plug on the inside of the cassette so that they just waxed the outside.
Okay, cool.
So threads weren't affected, and then the chainring is actually like they tape it so it's just like the teeth.
Hey Jax, that's Alex's dog. Or maybe the other one. They're twins.
I can't tell them apart.
Yeah. Okay, this next one sounds miserable for all of us. Would you rather Everest at 10,000 feet or double century in a Florida summer?
I have a critical question with this. What is the temperature at 10,000 feet?
Oh yeah, good point.
Whatever you want it to be. And then in Florida, it's over 100.
Ugh.
Then the Everesting for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it's cold at 10,000 feet and you have to Everest in the cold, no way.
Nope.
Oh my gosh, it'd be miserable, right?
I'd
What would
rather
you pick,
climb
Chad?
any a day of the week. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Chad.
same. Yeah, climbing's just way more interesting than dying a slow death in the high humidity.
The big thing that I'm thinking of too, depending on the roads in Florida, like getting run off the roads by like big trucks or something like that, you know, whereas 10,000 feet, a lot of the time you're up against like fewer people. And then you also, in most cases, when you're really high up on a mountain pass and you're on a bike, something like that, people just go, instead of thinking like, oh, a cyclist, I don't have to move over. They're like, this person's crazy. I'm going to give them lots of space. So
I want to mess with this one.
Yeah, exactly. Don't want to mess with this one. They're riding the bike up here. They're weird.
If anybody at home doesn't know where Florida is or what it's like, just take your fans inside and replace them with hair dryers and ride there for 10 hours.
And turn your shower on
what
max.
it's like. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is what double century in Florida is like.
It'd be rough. Okay. Next one says you have to cut your ride short. What do you do with a leftover bottle of mix? I do this almost every single ride because I bring an extra bottle of I always have an extra bottle just in case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What do you do, Chad?
I just leave it on the bike. I mean, it'll be there next time, right?
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
With a shame.
Just all sticky and gross.
I do usually leave it on the bike, but then I go out and realize, oh man, I got to throw that away. So I typically forget it, unfortunately. Yeah. Very wasteful.
I have a rollover system. I bring the bottle back to the fridge and then I use it the next day. And then I usually end up having another bottle ready. And then the same thing happens to that bottle. So I have like 2-day bottles, but they're almost always in the fridge, except for during the work. I'm a nerd. Yeah.
No, that's, I can relate to that. I think I have 3 frozen bottles in my freezer right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But what's your time cutoff? That's what I was trying to think of is I will reuse it, but there's definitely a time in which even in the fridge, it's done.
Yeah.
Leftovers are spooky.
Yeah, they are. I just use sugar in mine and salt. So just glucose, fructose, salt. That's it. So it's not like I don't know if y'all remember Cytomax back in the day, but if you looked at that stuff wrong, it went sour. It was like incredible, and it would smell so bad, and you just had to throw everything
I still have
away.
some in my freezer.
Oh, gross. You still have Cytomax bottles in there. But yeah, it doesn't seem to go bad as fast. But if it's beyond 2 days, even if it's in the fridge, I get rid of it. I just feel uncomfortable with it otherwise, even though it's probably not justified. I don't know. But this is a painful point on this. I went to Park City over the weekend with the intent of racing Park City point to point, but the air quality index was above 100 in the morning. And the way that I view air quality index, we did a full, a deep-ish dive, a Jonathan deep dive on this on an episode that you weren't on, Chad. But if it says it's 100, then I'm probably going to ride through pockets of when it's 50 and pockets of when it's 120. It's not as uniform as we all think in terms of how smoke is dispersed throughout, especially a 76-mile mountain bike ride around Park City and a bunch of valleys and peaks and everything else. So because of that, I decided to not race. And instead, I found a pocket of good air up at the very top of the mountains, and I just did 3x20 instead. So I drove all the way to Park City just to do 3x20, which is terrible. But just the same, I had 2 Camelback reservoirs or 2 of the U-Sweepack reservoirs. I had those filled, and then I had 6 bottles as well that were all filled with mix and everything else. And I didn't put them in the trunk of my car. Instead, I put them in the frunk of the car, and they got hot on the way back. And I had to pour all of that out. Even just mixing that took like an hour. So much work.
Tesla challenges.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. This is just like an episode of Jonathan has a Tesla. Let's find out how.
No, I can't believe that
what the heck is a frunk?
I wasted. I'm bummed that I wasted that much mix. It hurts. It's expensive, and then it's expensive in terms of time. Mixing all that is a pain. So
I feel like I'm somewhere between you and Chad, John. If I remembered, I'd put it in the fridge, but I bring extra calories in the forms of like solids or some gels just for that reason, because 9 times out of 10 I won't use the extras, so those are easier to stick back in the shelf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I do want to have like a mini fridge out by my bike for this very purpose, so then I don't fill up my normal refrigerator with like sticky bottles. My wife would probably appreciate that. Okay, next one from Liam. When is the Jonathan versus Alex Wild XC battle going to happen? And to clarify, that's me on an e-bike versus Alex not on an e-bike.
Anytime, any place, Jonathan.
Alex is ready to throw down. Which e-bike do I get? That's what really matters here. Do I get a Levo or a Levo SL? Because the Levo SL is not as powerful.
It depends if you want it to be a race.
Look at this guy.
I feel like the Levo, you just straight up drop me.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I would think so.
The Levo SL would be more fun. And I feel like we got to choose a course where you have to choose battery wisely, like not just turbo till it's dead. Like this is the set course and you have to choose when you're in turbo and not.
This seems like a fun thing. Can somebody help us lay out the parameters for this in the forum or in the chat comments? So then Alex and I can do this post Cape
this
Epic.
should definitely happen.
Yeah. This could be fun. Levo SL, I think, is the one to use. So I'm going to have to find an e-bike first. Okay. This next one is for Hannah specifically. What's your best advice for a female high schooler in pursuit of a college mountain bike scholarship?
There's several aspects here, but I think the biggest, like the first thing that comes to mind is race NICA. And, obviously if you're already super into mountain biking and you're racing some of the UCI junior series, that's great too. But I know a lot of high schoolers don't necessarily have access to that. And I've had a lot of young female mountain bikers come to me asking, do I have to race those? Because that's hard, like your parents have to be very involved and get you there. And if you can, it's great, but I don't think it's essential. I think NICA is really a key place that colleges are looking right now. And so racing NICA, because obviously you need to demonstrate some sort of desire to race. But then beyond that, I think it can be, there's only one winner, right, in NICA. So if you're not, or in any race, so if you're not winning NICA, it's still not a place to stress. Just showing up, doing the races is the most important thing. And then after that, sell what you're good at. And I think that that's something that especially young females can struggle with. And so, you don't need to just sit around and wait for a college to come to you. You can reach out to them, and most all of them will be super excited because most colleges want female cyclists. They don't grow on trees. Sometimes they can be really rare, especially mountain bikers. And so reach out to a variety of colleges. There's a lot of, there's a surprising amount of different ones, and sell what you're good at. And that doesn't have to be, I believe that I can win X, Y, and Z. It can be, look at the trajectory. I raced freshman and then I raced JV, and my junior year I was racing varsity. And then my senior year, I finally broke the top 10, and I've just been increasing my whole time. And by the time I'm a senior, if this increase continues, look where I'll be. That can be really exciting, especially to a coach, because they can think, oh, wow, I could be a part of this journey. Sell leadership, sell that you want to be on the group ride, sell that you want to do more than one discipline, sell that you're a huge encouraging factor, all of these things. It might not be the thing that gets you a scholarship, but it could be one of many things that make you stand out and make that coach and that college think, gosh, we really want her because she's going to elevate everyone on the team. And so really think through those things, and don't be afraid to say them out loud and really sell yourself, because if you don't, who will? So that's the moment to let it all shine. And just because you sell yourself doesn't mean you're not humble. You can do it humbly and with a smile, and I think just showing passion goes a really, really long way. So Go for it.
Fantastic tips.
Yeah.
Really good advice.
I can't stress the trajectory piece enough. Just personal tidbit. My best result in varsity in NICO was 14th. So like, it's really easy to get wrapped up in results, but cycling is an interesting sport where more time, more dedication, and just a long period of time, you can see a lot of changes. So just because, like Hannah said, you're not winning, it doesn't mean that you can't provide value or be a good cyclist. If you love it, pursue it.
Yeah. I also love that thought about don't be afraid to acknowledge what you're good at. If you're like, I'm a really good descender, or I'm really good at short, hard efforts, I'm really good at long stuff, like sell that. And we should all be proud of those individual strengths that we have. If that's your ability to read a race really well, who knows, whatever, or elevate the team's morale, like you said as well, Hannah, like own those things. Those are all really valuable.
If you like this video, make sure you give us a thumbs up.
If you didn't like this video, you can give it a thumbs down, but let us know what you would have done differently in the comments below.
If you want to see more of these videos, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you want to become a faster cyclist, check out TrainerRoad.com.
Do it.